How you doing? Nick Digilio here. How's it going? Hey, thank you for checking out my YouTube channel. Subscribe. It's free. Tell your friends. Go to patreon.com/NickDShow. Pick a tier. A little monthly donation every month. $3, $9, $25 a month will help me to create more content, more videos, and you'll get exclusive behind-the-scenes stories about what happened at WGN. The real story, not the bullshit that's been out there. Tell you the real story, but become a patron to do that at patreon.com/NickDShow. We are a little over a week away from the launch of my podcast, the Nick D Podcast, on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. Check out radiomisfits.com. Subscribe to that. Okay, listen. Reality TV obviously has been a massive thing now forever. I think it was probably a little over 20 years ago when Survivor came on. I mean, reality TV had existed before that, but Survivor, really, I remember the summer of 2000 when Survivor came on, and I didn't watch it, but everybody watched it, and it became huge, and that's really the show that blew up reality TV. It happened right around the time that Who Wants to Be a Millionaire became huge, and then all the primetime game shows happened, and then reality shows. This was a really easy way to have big ratings and earn a lot of money for networks and cable networks and things like that, because you didn't have to sign a bunch of big stars. You didn't have to pay actors or actresses. You had to pay writers, but not really. Game shows became very easy to produce. They were cheap and they made a lot of money and the ratings were through the roof. And the same thing happened with reality shows. And we all know what happened after that. I mean, reality shows are part of life now. And so during that time, they experimented with a lot of different reality shows. And my favorite reality show of all time, and I'm not a snob. I'll watch reality shows. There are certain reality shows that I love. One of my favorite shows ever on TV is Top Chef, which I guess falls under the category of reality competition show. But I've watched stupid shit, the stupid reality shows in the past. And at one time, VH1 was kind of like a ridiculous place for reality shows. I watched all the Dr. Drew shit, all of the Celebrity Rehab and all that shit. I watched all of that. I watched Mob Wives. I watched all of that goofy shit, the Surreal World, the Surreal Life, or whatever the fuck it was called, where they put celebrities in there. Surreal Life, I watched that. Hey, listen, you're talking to a guy that religiously watches Big Brother every year on CBS. So I'm not above that. And VH1 was kind of like lowest common denominator for a while. They did a bunch of shit. They still do a bunch of stupid shit on VH1, and MTV. You got your Love and Hip Hop and Love and Basketball. You've got, obviously the classic is The Real World, one of the very first ones that ever really took off, and that was way back in the early 90s when The Real World started. That's the granddaddy of them all right there. And I love The Real World. You've got The Hills and all these other shows that came out of that time. But VH1 really sort of sunk. By the time they were doing Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew and the Surreal Life and those dating shows with what's his ass, Bret Michaels, Whores on Wheels, or whatever the hell it was called, and then Flava Flav Looking for Love or Flavor of Love, where they would have all these women show up. And I remember season 3, in the first episode, one of the contestants, she actually took a shit on the staircase leading up to Flavor Flav's bedroom. It was all about watching train wreck drunk people and finding love. Flavor Flav and the Bret Michaels Whores on Wheels, or whatever it was called, and all of that stuff. It was just ridiculous. And then by the time that Brigitte Nielsen and Flavor Flav had a show, I mean, VH1 was really scraping the bottom of the barrel for some of the stupid and horrible, borderline offensive garbage that they put out. Of course, I watched most of it. But they weren't known for their class, for the kind of programming that they did. And meanwhile, at least, MTV, The Real World was actually trying to do something to make a social statement, to do something, until they got to Vegas. And then once I stopped watching The Real World after the Vegas, or 3/4 of the way through the Vegas episode, because then it just became about people fucking. That's all it was. It was not about exploring issues and stuff like that. The first few episodes, the first few seasons of The Real World, I thought were compelling. They were exploitive and whatever it was, but I think they were actually trying to do something. to matter socially or to really make some sort of statement. And then by the time they got to Vegas, it was all about drinking and screwing in a hot tub. That's all it was, and I stopped watching. But those first few seasons, those first like 5-6 seasons of The Real World, I thought were great. And they've brought The Real World back. They're doing reunions now. They did a reunion with the New York, the original cast, which I watched. And now, they just finished up the LA cast, the second season. And they're going to do San Francisco, and they're going to continue to do it. And I'll be watching. Of course I'll be watching. That's one of the reasons why I got Paramount Plus. Now, Paramount Plus is the streaming network, very good streaming network, that has, your movies and CBS stuff and a whole bunch of different stuff. They have all the VH1 stuff. They have all the MTV stuff, both the new stuff, like the Real World stuff and the challenge shit that they do, and the older stuff that they show, like Behind the Music and some of the other documentaries, Storytellers and Unplugged and all that stuff. So this catalog, Paramount Plus, the streaming network, has access to the catalog. And I think they should bring back, and I think we should start like a petition. They need to bring back Bands on the Run. Bands on the Run, VH1, lasted one season. One season. My opinion, best reality show of all time. Best reality show of all time. It aired from April to the end of July, beginning of April to the end of July in 2001. In 2001. Only one season. I fucking loved Bands on the Run. I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought the concept was great. My girlfriend at the time and I, we were living together. We watched it every week, and the idea was this. It was called Bands on the Run, and it was 4 unsigned bands. Okay, they got these 4 unsigned bands from different parts of the country, and the idea was that they would each get into a van, and they would tour around the country, go to different cities. Every time they got to a city, they would play a gig, but what they had to do was sell tickets, advertise it, get as many people into the club as possible, sell as much merch as possible, t-shirts, any of that, cassettes, CDs, any of that stuff. So, and you go into the city, and there were 4 bands, and the bands were Harlow, an all-girl rock band from LA. There was the Josh Dotis Band out of New York City, and they were kind of a Dave Matthews kind of a jammy kind of band. Soul Cracker out of San Diego, and there were these 4 douchebags who were sort of pop rock kind of stuff, but very sort of commercial. And then there was Flicker Stick out of Dallas. 5 guys, 2 of them were brothers, and they played rock. They were like a rock. They were kind of the rock band. So these were the 4 different bands, different parts of the country, different types of music. And they would all each drive into a city. They would each have different gigs that they would have to publicize. They would sell tickets. And whoever sold the most merch, sold the most tickets, did the most publicity, and earned the most money for each city would win that city. And then they would be placed first place through 4th place. And then, at the end of a certain time period, the 4th place team, the 4th place would be kicked off. And then there would be 3 teams left, and it would go down until there was 2 to 1, and then finally the winners. They would get $20 a person, $20 per band member per city, money for gas, and a hotel room. That's it. The rest of it, they would have to go, and they would have to make flyers. They would have to publicize the gigs, sell as many tickets, and whoever had the most money at the end of each stay in the city after their gig would win. Now, in order to stay in, if you were on the bottom and you didn't earn enough money, and you didn't sell enough tickets or merch or any of that stuff, you could battle your way back with a battle of the bands. So then the bottom 3 bands would do a battle of the bands in a club, and whoever won by audience vote, whoever won the battle of the bands, could stay. And the band who didn't, who had the less, the least amount of money earned, would get kicked off. So that was your savior. That was your save. Even if you didn't sell any tickets, or if you didn't sell any merch or anything like that, you could still win the Battle of the Bands and stay in the competition. So that was the setup, and they would drive through. They came to Chicago for a couple of nights. They played a bunch of gigs in Chicago. If I remember correctly, I think they played Elbow. One band played Elbow Room. One band played Lucky Strike. So this went on. And again, this was the spring into the summer of 2001. And I was addicted to the show. I loved it. I thought the setup was fantastic. The bands, okay, the Josh Dotis band, just like douches. They were just goofball. The leader of the band was Josh Dotis, glasses, bald guy, and they played sort of jam music. They were kind of the Dave Matthews thing, only they weren't nearly as good. And they were likable, but they were like, they got kicked off first. And then there was Harlow. Harlow were the hard rock chick band. You know, they drank a lot, they partied a lot, they had the teased hair. They were the hard rockin' chicks. They were a chick band. Wore leather, played guitars. You know, it was like Lita Ford and all that kind of stuff. And then Soulcracker, they were the douchebags. The clean cut sort of douchebag guys. And then Flickerstick, they were drunks. They were just drunks. The two brothers were fighting all the time. And so what basically happened was, the final two, Harlow. By the way, if you're not familiar with Harlow, I think they're still around. But David Cross has a I can't remember what it's called, but David Cross has from the 2000s, like 2001, 2002, has a comedy album where he talks about how he got loaded. He partied with Harlow one night and then had to appear on a morning zoo show. David Cross from Mr. Show. He was scheduled to appear on a morning zoo show in some shitty city. And he ran into Harlow the night before the club, and he ended up partying with Harlow all night. And this fucking story is hilarious. David Cross tells this hilarious story about he stayed out partying with Harlow from Bands on the Run, stayed up all night, and then had to do this horrible morning zoo show. And if you've ever heard it, the best part is when after he's partied with Harlow all night, he's passed out in his hotel room and he's left a wake-up call because he's got to do a morning zoo show, and his phone is ringing. Someone's knocking on the door going, "Answer the phone! Answer the phone!" Anyway, that's David Cross talking about partying with Harlow. Harlow, they were terrible. Josh Dotis' band was terrible. Soulcracker was terrible. They weren't good. None of these bands were good except for Flickerstick. I legitimately liked Flickerstick. In fact, when the show went off the air, I went to see Flickerstick a few times in concert at the Metro a couple of times. I bought their CDs. I became a Flickerstick and still am an unapologetic fan of Flickerstick. So what would happen was, they would go through and they would try. So the show was them going, trying to advertise, trying to sell tickets out on the street, trying to get gigs, trying to get on radio stations to promote their shows and working really hard. The food truck race, the Great Food Truck Race, hosted by Tyler Florence on the Food Network, totally ripped off the concept. Completely ripped off the concept of Bands on the Run, except it was food trucks. Food trucks would drive from city to city, and whoever had the biggest till at the end, who would get the most food sold, who would do the most, make all the money, they would win the week. Same thing. The Food Network for the food truck show completely ripped off Bands on the Run. So this goes on. You're watching it every week. I'm rooting for Flickerstick, and the reason why I was rooting for Flickerstick is because they were just drunks. They played rock and roll. They did the rock and roll thing. They drove around the van. They'd get to the city. Immediately, they get shit-faced. They'd get drunk. They never cared about plugging the gigs. If they did, they try to pass out a few flyers. Their houses were never really big. They never went out and hit the streets to sell tickets. The band that did that was Soulcracker. Soulcracker was the band that did that. Every week, these douchebags, how you doing? These douchebag idiots would run around on the streets. They would do everything that they were supposed to do. They'd win every city. They would raise the most money. They would sell the most merch. They would get radio appearances. They would have the biggest, houses. Without question, every week, Soulcracker had the most merch, sold the most tickets, had the most people, did the hardest work. They were out there all the time, busting their ass, trying to sell tickets, trying to get people to come and selling all that merchandise. Harlow, they did okay. But Flickerstick, Josh Dotis' band, nobody liked them. That's why they got kicked off. They didn't do such a great job selling merch, and they were really not a very smart band. They got booted. Harlow did okay, but it came down, the final was Flickerstick versus Soulcracker. And Soulcracker, again, not a good band. Their music sucked, but they did everything that they were supposed to do to win the competition. Okay? Flickerstick didn't give a shit. They would show up, all right, whatever, we're going to, they'd blow their $20 immediately on booze each. They'd get shit-faced. The two brothers would get into fist fights. They would bust things. They would wreck their hotel room. Just like rock stars. They were doing what rock stars do. They would go from town to town, try to get laid. They'd get fucking hammered. Whatever, man. They'd have 8 people at the gig or whoever was in the bar. If they saw somebody on the street, they'd say, hey, we're doing this. And they were always in last place. They never sold any merch. They never sold any tickets. They just got drunk. They beat the shit out of each other. They wrecked hotel rooms. They were rock and roll. And that's why I was rooting for them. I was rooting for them because they were first of all, the music was by far the best of the 4 bands, Flicker Stick, by far. It wasn't even close. But on top of that, they didn't give a fuck about the competition. They were hilarious. They would just show up, get shit-faced, and not sell anything. But because of the Battle of the Bands, they won the Battle of the Bands every single time. And it would piss off the other bands. Like, the other bands were, what the fuck? They did nothing. Flicker Stick, they did nothing. They got laid, they got loaded, they beat the crap out of each other. They had 6 people at their gig, and yet they're still in the competition because of the Battle of the Bands. Because the Battle of the Bands required you to be a good band. So I loved it. I loved the fact that, like, especially Soul Cracker, because Soul Cracker, they were such douchebags, and they were so mad. They would think, Daddy Flicker Stick, all they do is drink, and bee-dee-dee-dee-doo, and we did this, and we did that, and they lost because they suck. They lost each Battle of the Bands. So Flicker Stick would come in, do nothing, and then win the Battle of the Bands. And it was fucking great. It was great every time. And you would see the other bands be pissed off, and then eventually Dotus got kicked off, Harlow got kicked off, and it was down to Soul Cracker and Flicker Stick. And you were either rooting for the band that was clean-cut and nice. They had, listenable music, I guess, and they did everything right. They followed all the rules. They sold all the tickets. They sold all the merch. They made the most money. They were the nicest. They did everything right. Or you were rooting for them, or you were rooting for the fucking drunk guys who didn't care, who would show up, not sell anything, not give a shit if they sold tickets, get shit-faced, beat the shit out of each other, get laid, and then win Battle of the Bands. And ultimately, Flicker Stick won. The right band won. And it was just such compelling stuff to watch. To watch the drama, to watch these bands and the dynamic in each band, because being in a band is fascinating anyway. And and whoever was in charge of this show chose the best, the most correct 4 bands you could possibly imagine. 4 bands that couldn't be more different. 4 bands from different parts of the country. 4 bands that operated differently. The genre of music, all 4 of them were different. And whoever programmed it, whoever was the people who interviewed the possible contestants, did a fucking great job. It's the best casting of a reality show ever. Whoever cast this show, VH1's Bands on the Run, is a genius. They did the best possible. The characters were all there. The storyline was there. The drama was already built in. And it was fucking great. It was edited beautifully. It was manipulative in the great way that reality show is. You picked a band, you picked a side, you rooted for them, you were pissed when they didn't do well. You were, as a Flicker Stick fan, sometimes I got frustrated because it was like, guys, sell 1 ticket. Maybe cut back on shot number 80 of Jaeger and try to sell a t-shirt. I don't know, maybe. But they won every Battle of the Bands, and then ultimately they won the whole competition. And then they got signed. The prize was $50,000 in cash, $100,000 in musical equipment provided by Guitar Center, and to be featured in a showcase in front of big-time execs, and to have a fully produced music video air regularly on VH1. That's back when they showed videos. And so Flicker Stick won this, and they did great, and they ended up getting signed. They released a few records. I have, like 3 of the CDs that they released, and they broke up, which was inevitable. And now I guess they're doing a reunion show in Dallas. All the original members, they have, Brandon and some of the other guys have teamed up and done different variations of Flicker Stick over the years. But yeah, and then they had great songs, but one of their best ones was they covered the Maisie Star song, Fading to You. And that was like their big sort of closer, was they would cover Mazzy Star, and it was great. So I saw him. I saw him at the Metro twice. I saw him at the Vic once. I became a Flicker Stick fan. I got 2 Flicker Stick T-shirts. I got CDs. I'm a Flicker Stick fan, unapologetic Flicker Stick fan. So and of course I was always made fun of because what the fuck is Flicker Stick? Who is Flicker Stick? I'm like, Flicker Stick, man. Bands on the Run. The winner of Bands. Only the winner of Bands on the Run. So anyway. To me, best reality show of all time. And it was so special, just that one season. From April to July of 2001, it aired. I think there were only maybe 16 episodes, maybe. And it was so entertaining. Every episode was fun and compelling. The music was cool. It was great. And the right band won. And I don't know. So I love Bands on the Run. And I've often said that they should bring it back. But I really, and now because of like COVID and all that stuff and touring, and who knows if that's even possible or when that's going to be possible to do a show like that again. But they never did it again. And sometimes I think that's good. Sometimes I think you can't, you can't catch lightning in a bottle twice. And that was definitely lightning in a bottle. That one season, that one perfect, fucking awesome, hilarious, entertaining, great season of VH1 Bands on the Run. I don't think it can be duplicated. I really don't. So sometimes I was like upset that they wouldn't do another season of it. But then I was like, well, you can't. This is just so special. Now, the thing that I am pissed off about is that Paramount Plus is not showing it. They're going back and they're showing old Real Worlds. They're showing old, storytellers and the Black Ink Crew and Love and Hip Hop and The Hills. All this shit that they're showing, and they have access to it, but they're not showing that season of Bands on the Run. And I'm appealing to you. Let's get in touch with Paramount Plus. Get in touch with Paramount Plus, and let's go put the season of Bands on the Run on the air. Stream it. For Christ's sake, stream the one season. It's not going to take up a lot of room. It's like 16 episodes of television. Get it on there. We want VH1's Bands on the Run, one season, on Paramount Plus. Come on. What the fuck? I need more Flicker Stick in my life. And Soul Cracker. And Harlow and Josh Dotis. I want those people back. I want to watch those episodes again. Because I vividly remember watching my girlfriend at the time, Helena. Helena and I would watch it every week. And just love it. So fuck, Paramount Plus, get off your ass. Put VH1's Bands on the Run. Get that one season of Bands on the Run back. Stream it on Paramount Plus, for Christ's sake. Do everybody a damn favor. So anyway, yeah, Flicker Stick. They're doing a full reunion, everybody. And I'm sure they'll get drunk, and I'm sure they'll beat the shit out of each other before the gig. But I'm sure the gig will be great. They'll rock their hearts out. And it'll be in Dallas. And I think it's coming up, I guess, in February. They're actually going to... I hope they tour. That would be fantastic if they did. So anyway... just thinking about reality shows, the best reality show of all time, VH1's Bands on the Run. Come on, Paramount Plus, get on it. What are you doing? All right. Okay. Thanks for watching, and Flicker Stick rules.